Well, hello everybody, and thanks for joining me on this live stream. Today I'm talking about food and how essential it is when we're on the journey of healing chronic pain that we reduce the inflammatory load in the body, and food is a huge source of inflammation and we need to be aware of it. So it's one of the 4 pillars that I use in my daily practice, and today I'm just going to share some tips and some history and some great authors out there who are leading the way with their books and their knowledge on this subject. So Hippocrates, the father of medicine, about 2,500 years ago said that food is your medicine and medicine should be your food. And he also said that all diseases start in the gut. And now we understand that more with the study of epigenetics and the study of the microbiome, and mapping out the DNA coding of the microbiome in addition to the human genome as well. So here we are 2,500 years ago, and the science is showing that when we eat certain foods, we reduce inflammation. And when we eat other foods, we increase inflammation in the body. And inflammation is the cellular state of almost all, if not all, chronic diseases, and it's really important that we understand this. So what are the foods that we should be looking at? Well, let's start with the most abundant one in our diets, or should be if we're following this approach, and that's fruits and vegetables and fiber. So let's talk about fruits. Well, fruits are a great resource for nutrition, for fiber, for lots of minerals and vitamins. But when it comes to inflammation, it's important to eat the optimal ones for that. So berries and cherries are great in season for this. Apples, kiwis, and also your plums and nectarines and peaches are great. The other ones to maybe eat less of because they're higher in sugar and fructose, and they can increase your inflammatory load, is pears, bananas, and oranges. Now there's a lot in between there, between these, but these are great starting points. Dates, figs are great resources for nutrition and fiber. One of my good friends and naturopathic doctor says that figs is the best food possible. So full of nutrition. Okay. So what about vegetables? Well, many vegetables, and all leaf greeny vegetables are great, and we should be eating them in a large amount in our diet according to our intestine and what we can eat. But you pick basically anything you can grow in your garden, with maybe a few exceptions of the nightshade vegetables that come to mind, because the nightshades are those with the skins and seeds: the tomatoes, cucumber, zucchini, eggplant, and the peppers. So these are great if you cook them in a pressure cooker or all day in a slow cooker if you're cooking them. But if you're eating them raw, like a pepper or a tomato or a cucumber, then it's best to remove the seeds and remove the skin, which is easy enough for a pepper and a cucumber, because you can just skin it and then half it or quarter it and then remove the seeds. But tomatoes are tricky, so best way for that is just to cross the top of the tomato with a knife, and then maybe for 30 to 60 minutes in boiling water, allow the skin to peel, and then you can half it and remove the seeds. So for those, maybe larger tomatoes like a Roma tomato are great for that. Okay, so these are some vegetables, fruits, and fiber. Flaxseed is a great source of fiber that I encourage people to use if they've got constipation, but a great stool bulking agent, which is really important to remove the toxins from the intestine and to increase that intestinal transit time. Okay, so we've got the natural foods there. So let's move on to the proteins. What about proteins? Well, great protein sources, if you can tolerate them: eggs, fishes, wild fish. Animal protein is fine if you're an animal meat lover, but make sure it's fresh. Make sure it's grass-fed, grass-finished if you can. It's a bit challenging here up in Canada to do that, but as much as you can, that's the optimal way to have meat. Other protein sources, of course, is dairy. Now, dairy you gotta be careful because milk proteins contain casein A1, which is an inflammatory protein. So it's best to replace milk protein or milk with goat's milk is great, or some of the nut milks like almond milk is a good alternative. Coconut milk is also a good alternative. For yogurts, if you're going to eat yogurt, high fat, 10% fat yogurt is optimal because it ferments the milk protein in, and it's tolerable for most people. So for ice creams, if you love ice cream and dessert, then stay away from stay away from the general dairy yogurt, and just look at the labels. Coconut-based ice cream is a great option for that. Okay, so it's dairy and protein. Let's move on to fats. Fats are a great source of energy, and you get more than double the amount of energy per unit gram of weight for the food. So fats are a great source, and I think they should be in most meals, if not all meals, because it will increase that fullness sensation, which is essential when we're eating our healthy fruits and vegetables, etc. So the old adage that fat is bad or fat is unhealthy is, I believe, not true. There's about 53 studies, randomized controlled studies over the years showing that health benefits of eating fat, and that's like your traditional skins on a chicken, etc. It's simply not true that they're unhealthy. So what are your healthy fats in addition to the skins of meat? Well, avocados are a great fruit for that because it's got a big seed. Your oils, your coconut oil and your almond oil, great for cooking, but also for raw as well. And then the olive oil is great, less so for cooking because it changes at high temperature, but great for your salads, along with some lemon and vinegar. Great ways to have your salads as a dressing. So other fats, nuts are a great treat as well as a great food for protein and fats. So almost all nuts are fantastic for our health as long as you don't have allergies. But the cashews and the peanuts are, they're not tree nuts, they're more plant nuts, and they do have potential toxins in them. So best not to have the old cashews and peanuts. So there's some fats. Carbohydrates. What about good old carbs? Well, the grains essentially do have inflammatory proteins in them, and like your traditional rices, potatoes, and grains, wheat, etc., and even some gluten-free breads and other products can have inflammatory proteins in them. So best to minimize them as much as possible. If you really must have bread, then sourdough is, I think, the best because it reduces the inflammatory proteins within the grain. Rice, if you really must have rice, then Indian white basmati has got the lowest starch content. And if you if you cook and then chill it in the fridge and then reheat it later, it has less inflammatory proteins in it. And so too with potatoes, regular white or red potatoes. If you cook and then store in the fridge and then reheat the next day, then you're reducing the starch load there. One alternative for a regular potato is a sweet potato and yams. So they don't have inflammatory proteins and they can fill you up and give you a good starch load as well for your meals, especially evening meal. Other ones, the other vegetables, parsnips are a great alternative, as well as cassava. And if you've never heard of cassava, well, if you go to the supermarket and look at the unusual vegetables section, you'll find a brown looking cucumber, which is a very, very hard vegetable that you can skin and then cook in slices bake it in the oven with some nice spices. and it's a great way for your starch load. And I enjoy all of these depending on the week and depending on what my choices are. So these are great ways to get your carbs into your body and to get that sugar load with these healthier carbohydrates. So what about fermented foods? Well, fermented foods have been used for thousands of years to prolong the life of the foods, and they have got great abilities to enhance your probiotics, your natural healthy bugs in that gut of yours, being controlled all the time by the food that we eat. So foods that are fermented, like the sauerkraut or kimchi, pickled ginger, high dose or high fat yogurt are great sources of fermented foods, as well as some red wine. If you enjoy some wine, that's a great fermented grape drink. Kombucha, another drink based in either black or green tea, is fantastic. If you're out and with friends and you want to order a drink in public, you can certainly do that, or purchase some yourself from the local grocery store. So these are some fermented foods. What about treats? Well, I've mentioned nuts. It's a great option. Be careful with trail mixes or mixed nuts, because they will likely contain the cashew and the peanuts, and so therefore best to avoid those. But others, chocolate, if you're a chocoholic and you love your chocolate, then higher than 70% chocolate, dark chocolate is great for that. And just keep it to a minimum, maybe 1 or 2 cubes or sections of your bar. So there's some nuts, and there's some tips on the treats that you can have. And what about the last thing is herbs. Herbs are the greatest concentration of foods that we eat. And there's 5 main ones that I use for cooking on a regular basis. So you got the cinnamon and cloves, like powdered version. You've got mint and black pepper, good old-fashioned black pepper, and turmeric or curcumin is a great source of an anti-inflammatory herb that you can have on a daily basis to help your intestinal health. Other herbs are great as well for a multiple range of reasons, like sage and oregano, basil. But whatever takes your fancy, I strongly encourage you eat with these herbs as well for flavor in your foods. So, the reason for choosing foods that have low inflammatory load is because what happens is, if your diet's predominantly with this, then you will make a genetic switch in the microbiome, or the gut bugs and the intestine. And when these genetic codes are switched from an inflammatory base to a healing base, then the whole body starts to heal and change. The effects are up through the vagal nerve, up to the brain, and then the brain starts to run the show regarding the choices of food and the health of your body. And it's all because of those gut bugs, which outnumber me and you by 10 to 1. That's about 300 trillion of them are in there and being programmed all the time. Every single time we're either enhancing them or pulling them down. And so it's up to you. What do you want to eat? I strongly recommend to eat this type of way for most of us, unless you've got real dietary restrictions. That makes it very difficult. But we all need to reduce inflammation if we're going to reduce chronic disease in our bodies. So I hope you like this little talk. It's been great to share on such a huge subject that's radically changed for me in the last several years, with the readings with Stephen Gundry with the Plant Paradox. And I use his list, Yes List, No List. You can find that on Google or on his website for a list of these foods. David Perlmutter, he wrote the famous book Grain Brain, and several others, and he's a big promoter of this style of eating, as well as Mark Hyman from Cleveland, who's written multiple books, about 10 or so, many of them bestsellers in The famous ones are Food, and it's about cooking, and then Food about what you eat. So just a simple title of Food, and he promotes this Pegan diet. It's a mix between the paleo and the vegan. And so Mark is a wonderful promoter of this way of eating, and he's the leader in the world of functional medicine in Cleveland at the clinic there. So he's a great resource if you want to follow him or any of these great docs on podcasts or books. And I have really enjoyed their knowledge base, and I follow them myself. So there we have it for today. Thanks for listening, and I look forward to the next live stream in 1 week's time. Thanks so much. Take care. Bye for now. Thanks for joining the course. I look forward to seeing